So the Caitlin Clark game on NBC, as expected, drew pretty much, I'm not going to say record viewership, but drew a crazy high viewership. As you can see here, network aired the first two games of Sunday Night Basketball franchise last weekend. The doubleheader delivered record-setting viewership.
4.5 million people. That's how many viewers tuned in to watch Caitlin Clark's NBC debut on Sunday Night Basketball. Not to play basketball, to talk about it. And that number right there tells you everything you need to know about where women's basketball actually stands in.
He also added he hopes to see more of Clark moving forward, signaling the door is open for additional appearances. While no expanded role has been formally announced, the comments suggest genuine interest rather than casual praise. My guess is that Caitlin Clark is going to be
Because here's what NBC figured out that apparently nobody else has. When Caitlin Clark shows up, she doesn't just move the needle, she is the needle. That Lakers-Knicks game became the most watched Sunday night regular season NBA game since 2002, excluding Christmas. And yes, LeBron playing at Madison Square Garden for potentially the last time mattered. But scroll through social media that night and tell me who was trending. It wasn't LeBron. It wasn't Carmelo Anthony sitting next to her. It was Caitlin Clark.
An attraction. I don't think they're ever going to bring her on as a full-time, but she's going to be like a well-paid extra attraction. Like in the WWE, when, I'm not going to say the equivalent of The Rock, but like when a part-timer, like say if Roman Reigns a part-timer, when Roman Reigns shows up, it's an attraction, it's a big deal. I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to bring Caitlin Clark on to make it matter when Caitlin Clark's on.
NBC's Rich Kadalos didn't just praise her performance. He specifically highlighted how well prepared she was, how naturally she handled the spotlight, how clearly she communicated the game. This wasn't charity. This was a network executive recognizing they'd struck gold and immediately planning to bring her back later in the season. They're not scheduling her for random Tuesday night games either. They're saving her for marquee matchups, treating her like the attraction she actually is.
Never watched an NBA pregame show. Fact is that I think that it was a smart decision. I think that it was a really, really smart decision. I think that the NBA got it right. I think NBC got it right. They got it right by putting Caitlin Clark on it. And the scariest thing about this is that while this is all happening, we're going to be talking about it, Unrival's viewership is officially down 44% on last year. The official viewership numbers have been in so far. It is down 44% on last year. That is scary. Because the WNBA, it's growing year on year. College is growing year on year, by the way. 1 million people watched Oklahoma versus Texas.
Think about that strategy for a second. NBC isn't making Caitlin Clark a full-time analyst. They're making her a special event. Like when The Rock shows up in WWE. It matters because it's rare. When Roman Reigns appears after being part-time, it's an attraction. That's the play here. Use Caitlin Clark strategically throughout the season, so that when she's on, everyone knows it's a big deal. And the ratings prove that approach works. But here's where this gets really interesting. While Caitlin Clark is pulling 4.5 million viewers talking about the NBA, Unrivaled can't even crack 100,000 watching actual professional women's basketball.
Unrivaled, this is where the money's going into Project B, is that everybody knows that there is a gold mine somewhere. It's like in 2020 when everyone kind of knew crypto was legit and they were putting money into anywhere in crypto and hoping for the best. It's like in the early 2000s or the late 90s where everybody knew the internet was the way forward. Everybody knew the internet was the way forward, but people were putting money into bullshit just because they put .com in their company name, just because they had a website.
Unrivaled's viewership is down 44% from last year. Let that sink in. This is supposed to be the revolutionary new league that's going to change everything for women's basketball. They've got the best players in the world. They've sold 21,000 seats for their traveling tour. They've raised massive amounts of investment capital, and their TV ratings are collapsing. Meanwhile, 1 million people watched Oklahoma versus Texas in women's college basketball. The WNBA is growing year over year. College basketball is growing year over year, but Unrivaled, the league that was supposed to capitalize on all this momentum, is tanking.
So we're going to boom. They weren't wrong. The .com bubble wasn't wrong. They were completely right, as was the crypto bubble. But unless you back the right company, unless you back the right company, unless you back the right cryptocurrency, unless you, when there is some sort of a bubble like this, there's a bubble for a reason. And women's sports is a bubble. Unless, if you back the right league, and it seems like Unrivaled is backing the wrong league. Because, again, Unrivaled sold, 21,000 seats. Fair play. On a once-off traveling tour. TV viewership is now so bad that I think it's a big issue.
And here's the math that should terrify Unrivaled's investors. They've played 16 games so far, averaging about 60,000 concurrent viewers per game. Each game runs roughly 2 hours. Do the math on total viewership across all those games combined, and you're looking at maybe 4 million people who've watched any Unrivaled basketball at all. That's the cumulative total across 16 games. Caitlin Clark sat at a desk for one pre-game show, and potentially reached that many individual viewers in a single night. More people may have watched her analyze an NBA game than have watched every single Unrivaled game combined so far.
Caitlin Clark then have watched Unrivaled so far. There have been, 16 games Unrivaled? They've averaged about 60,000 concurrents. They've been on for about 2 hours each. So, maybe less than 4 million people have watched. I could be wrong on that, but there is a good chance that more people were watching. And to be honest, there's a lot of people watch every single game on Unrivaled. So, the odds that more individual people watched Caitlin Clark on NBC when she was on for that pregame show than watched every single game in Unrivaled combined so far, or is all the people that have watched a single Unrivaled game.
The contrast gets even starker when you look at media coverage. Mainstream sports media is still talking about Caitlin Clark's NBC appearance days later. People are still discussing her analysis of Peyton Pritchard's performance. Meanwhile, Unrivaled has had some incredible basketball. Paige Bueckers is hooping. Aaliyah Boston is dominating, and there's been complete silence from mainstream sports media. Not a single word. Caitlin Clark shows up on an NBA pregame show for one night, and suddenly everyone in sports is talking about women's basketball again. That's not just star power. That's a fundamental imbalance in how the market actually values different parts of women's basketball.
Hooping to start, and in fairness, Paige Bueckers is hooping, where Aaliyah Boston is hooping. Like, there's been no talk about that in mainstream media, but Caitlin Clark goes on to NBA Sunday or whatever it is, and immediately everyone in sports is talking about the WNBA, talking about women's basketball again. And it's like, Caitlin is the rising tide that lifts all boats, and Caitlin is only playing the W. So if WNBA doesn't happen, even long-term, short-term Unrivaled benefits, long-term it's going to die anyway. Like, there's a world where Unrivaled, where all these players become more relevant with Caitlin Clark, and Unrivaled's able to sell to the WNBA, and they all make a fucking boatload of money. But
now let's talk about what's really happening here, because this goes way deeper than just one person's popularity. The women's sports investment bubble is real. And like every bubble, it exists because investors correctly identified a massive opportunity. They're just backing the wrong vehicles. Think about the dot-com bubble in the late 90s. Investors weren't wrong that the internet was going to change everything. They were completely right about that, but they threw money at any company with .com in its name. Any business with a website, without discriminating between Amazon and Pets.com. The opportunity was real. Most of the investments were garbage. Same thing happened with crypto. The blockchain technology had genuine potential, but investors pumped billions into every random cryptocurrency and NFT project hoping to catch lightning in a bottle, when they should have been more selective about which specific applications would actually work. Women's sports is experiencing the exact same phenomenon right now. Front Office Sports just reported another group willing to invest $250 million into women's sports. And the article featured a picture of Caitlin Clark next to WSL Soccer. Really? Is that what we're doing? Just throwing money at anything with women athletes and hoping for the best? Because here's what the smart money should recognize. The bubble exists for a reason. Women's basketball is absolutely growing. That part is undeniable. The WNBA is setting viewership records. College basketball is exploding. There is absolutely a gold mine somewhere in women's sports. But Unrivaled is not it. Unrivaled's fundamental problem is that they're trying to create demand where none exists. They looked at the WNBA's growth and thought, people want more women's basketball in the offseason. But that's not what the data shows. What the data shows is that people want Caitlin Clark. They want stars they're invested in. They want storylines they care about. They want the stakes that come with a league that's been building for decades. You can't manufacture that with a startup league. No matter how much money you raise or how many star players you sign. The WNBA has spent 28 years building institutional credibility, developing rivalries, creating narratives that fans actually follow. Unrivaled has been around for a few months and expects people to care as much about their made-up teams and manufactured drama. And the viewership numbers prove it's not working. Down 44% year over year. That's not a small dip. That's a collapse. That's the market telling you that your product doesn't have the demand you thought it did. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark goes on one NBA pregame show and becomes the story of the night, not because NBC manufactured it, not because they threw marketing money at it, but because people genuinely wanted to hear what she had to say. That's organic demand. That's real value. Here's what makes this particularly significant for the future. NBC isn't stupid. They saw those ratings. They saw Caitlin Clark trending over LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, and they immediately started planning how to use her again. That's not charity. That's a business recognizing an asset. But here's the thing that Unrivaled and other women's sports ventures need to understand. Caitlin Clark's value doesn't exist in a vacuum. She's valuable because of the WNBA, because of her rivalry with Angel Reese, because of the Fever's playoff run, because of the storylines and stakes that the WNBA provides. You can't extract her from that context and expect the magic to transfer to a random off-season league. And this is where Unrivaled's strategy reveals its fundamental flaw. They're paying WNBA players massive salaries to play in the off-season, thinking that will pull fans from the WNBA. But it doesn't work that way. If anything, they're dependent on the WNBA to create the star power that makes their league remotely interesting. If the WNBA collapsed tomorrow, Unrivaled wouldn't benefit. They'd lose the entire ecosystem that makes their players relevant. Think about what happens if the WNBA struggle, if ratings decline, if investment dries up, if the league contracts instead of expands. Does Unrivaled suddenly become more popular? No. They lose the entire infrastructure that creates women's basketball stars in the first place. The college to WNBA pipeline is what makes these players household names. Unrivaled is entirely parasitic on that system. There's actually a world where this could work out for everyone, where Caitlin Clark and other WNBA stars become so valuable through their WNBA success that Unrivaled can eventually sell the league back to the WNBA for a massive profit, where all these players get paid, the investors make money, and the WNBA expands its footprint. But that only happens if the WNBA keeps growing. If the WNBA fails, everyone loses, and that's why these viewership numbers should concern everyone involved in women's basketball, not just Unrivaled's investors, but anyone who cares about the long-term health of the sport. Because right now we're watching money flow into ventures that aren't sustainable, into leagues that don't have organic demand, into business models that only work if the WNBA continues to thrive. The smart play, the play that NBC just made, is to recognize where the actual value lives. Caitlin Clark has value because she's Caitlin Clark. Yes, but she has that value because of what she accomplished in the WNBA, because of the platform the WNBA provided, because of the stakes and storylines that league created. You can't replicate that with a startup league and a pile of money. So when you see Caitlin Clark pull 4.5 million viewers for an NBA pregame show, while Unrivaled struggles to crack 60,000 for actual games, that's not just about star power. That's about the difference between organic demand and manufactured hype. That's about the difference between a sustainable business model and a bubble waiting to pop. The women's sports bubble is real. The opportunity is real. But unless investors start backing the right ventures, the ones with actual organic demand, the ones building on sustainable foundations, a lot of money is going to evaporate when this bubble bursts. And the scary part is that when it does, it might take legitimate opportunities down with. So here's the question. Is Unrivaled going to adjust its strategy before the money runs out? Or are we watching the pets.com of women's sports in real time? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more analysis on where women's basketball is actually heading, hit that subscribe button.